Alrighty, in-session correspondent Beth Karras, former Peterson trial judge and in-session contributor Stephen White, and jury consultant Josh Dubin with us now as we talk about the fact that some of these jurors who have been chosen are divorced. And we know that that's something. In fact, I was just watching the local news here in Joliet, news out of Chicago last night. And I know that a couple of the attorneys, the defense attorneys, were on last night as well saying, look, we got the jury we wanted. We got a couple of people who are divorced who can understand what a contentious divorce is. I want to bring in Josh Dubin here as a jury consultant. Josh, is this a good jury for the defense, the prosecution, both, in your opinion?
Well, it's really difficult for me to say that without having sat through voir dire, because I think that there is no bright line test in terms of whether or not a juror has been divorced or not, because I could see it easily cutting both ways. So let me give you an example. For a male juror, and I think it's juror number 5, who's been divorced, he could, look, we all make decisions based on our life experiences, so there's no doubt that jurors that have been through a divorce are going to relate back to their own experiences as a foundation for the decision-making process. But I could easily see juror number 5, who's a male, saying, listen, while my divorce may have been acrimonious, I never, ever thought about harming my spouse or ex-spouse. Whereas a female juror who had been through an acrimonious divorce and had thoughts like, boy, I hope he never hurts me, or felt threatened in any way, I could see cutting against the defense. I'd be much more concerned with how these jurors have been exposed to media about the case, which I think is would be the biggest concern for me.
Peterson, Josh, let me ask you, one of the things that keeps coming into play here is the fact that the jurors are not supposed to consider Stacey Peterson's disappearance in this trial. But you can't get away from it, because had it not been for her disappearing, Kathleen Savio's body would not have been exhumed, and we wouldn't be sitting here today. So let me ask you, can jurors, you're a jury consultant, you know what they're able to do, can they disconnect enough, do you think, from Stacey Peterson in that situation to look at this objectively, fully?
Absolutely not. I mean, having just come off of the Darun Ravi case, to ask jurors to do that, to ask jurors to somehow compartmentalize such an incendiary fact and to somehow put it out of their thought process is discounting human psychology at its most fundamental level. Just think about this for a second. And this is something that attorneys go through day in and day out picking juries across this country, which is this fundamental erosion of the presumption of innocence. Because what's going to happen here is that there's going to be and the judge is going to try to limit the amount of information that jurors hear. But what tips off the investigation into this case is the disappearance of Mr. Peterson's wife. So what you're asking jurors, the judge is not, there's going to be no evidence that she's dead, missing. Jurors are going to make assumptions. And it's just very, very difficult to ask jurors to compartmentalize information. And my biggest concern in a case like this is everybody that has been exposed to the media will invariably be asked some form of the following question. All right, I know you've read about the case and you've said you have an opinion. Can you put that aside? And in the words of my client and friend Roy Black, he always says to me, well, I feel like asking the prospective juror, where are you going to put it? We're not that efficient. We're not machines. We have feelings, and our thought process just doesn't work in a way that allows us to compartmentalize facts and feelings like that. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, very good point. I want to have one last question.
I have great faith in juries. I think that they're going to look at the evidence that's presented inside that courtroom and not anything that's outside.
All right. Thank you so much.
Think that's
Judge White.
Christy.
Josh, go ahead.
I just think I think that just quickly, the last point, that is a fundamental problem with our jury system, is judges across the country repeatedly asking jurors, do you think you could put that aside and be fair and impartial? When a juror makes an expression that I've read something and I have an opinion, the inquiry should end there. We should move on. There's this rush to get through jury selection. we should be very, very measured. I mean, we're dealing with whatever you think about Drew Peterson, we're dealing with somebody's freedom here. We should err on the side of caution and excuse prospective jurors when they equivocate at all about their fairness, because we are not efficient enough to be able to compartmentalize what we have seen and heard, especially what we've seen and heard in today's media-savvy society. You think there are any headlines out there that say, hey, Drew Peterson looks like we should give him a fair shake? He hasn't done himself any...
Well, there was a headline today. There was a headline in the Tribune saying that the prosecution's got an uphill battle. So I think part of it is out there, but you're right. The question is how much can they disconnect from it, and are they even able to do so? Of course, then you look at Casey Anthony, where people were in an uproar about that trial. But look what happened at the end of the day. Clearly, they were able to do it. But Josh Dubin, you bring up some great points. I want to thank you for being with us here, jury consultant there,
Thank you
as
for
well as
having
Beth
me.
Karras and Judge Stephen White.
Thank
We
you very much.
appreciate your insight.